I'm removing this person from your life. And the name will shock you. My beloved child, before your thoughts race ahead, stay here for one quiet moment, because something has already begun to change around you, even if your eyes have not recognized it yet. There are movements taking place behind the scenes of your life that cannot be measured by calendars or explained by coincidence. A door is closing, not because you failed to reach it, but because it was never meant to become your future. And as one chapter quietly fades, someone who has occupied far too much space in your journey is beginning to lose their place in it. You have wondered why certain conversations suddenly feel different. Why familiar faces seem strangely distant. Why situations that once demanded your attention now feel unusually silent. At first, you questioned yourself. You searched for reasons. You replayed moments over and over, believing you had missed something important. But what if the silence itself is the answer? What if what feels like confusion is actually the beginning of clarity? Stay with this thought, because what comes next may completely reshape the way you see the people around you. Not every person enters your life to remain forever. Some arrive to awaken your strength. Others appear to teach you what your heart deserves. And a very small number remain long enough to convince you that you cannot continue without them. That illusion is often the hardest one to release. Yet the moment you stop holding so tightly, life begins making room for something greater than you imagined. Look closely at your recent days. Have certain plans unexpectedly changed? Has someone become unusually quiet after once demanding your attention? Have you noticed yourself feeling lighter without understanding why? These are not random moments scattered through ordinary life. They are gentle signals, almost invisible, pointing toward a shift that has already begun. The story you believed would last forever is quietly rewriting itself while you are still reading the previous page. But there is another layer to this that very few people ever notice. The person being removed is not necessarily someone who appears negative on the surface. Sometimes the greatest distractions were the kindest smiles. Sometimes comfort delays destiny more effectively than conflict ever could. Think about that for a moment. What if the greatest obstacle has never looked like an obstacle at all? What if the one holding you back never intended to, yet their presence kept you standing still? Questions like these are uncomfortable, yet they often lead to the deepest freedom. You may expect a dramatic ending, loud words, or unforgettable confrontations. Instead, many life-changing separations happen almost silently. One conversation becomes the last. One meeting never happens. One message is never answered. One path quietly turns another direction. Years later, you realize that the smallest moment carried the greatest impact. Isn't it remarkable how destiny often whispers before it transforms everything? Pause for just another moment. Imagine looking back 1 year from today. Which names will still matter? Which faces will still shape your future? And which person will simply become part of a lesson that prepared you for something extraordinary? The answer is closer than you think. In fact, your heart has sensed it long before your mind was willing to admit it. There is a reason you felt drawn to hear these words today. Not because someone else chose this moment for you, but because your own journey has reached a turning point. Awareness always arrives before transformation. First, you begin noticing patterns. Then, you understand them. Finally, you step beyond them without fear. That sequence has already started within you, even if only one small piece has become visible. Still, do not rush to guess who this person might be. The obvious answer is often the wrong one. Expectations have a way of distracting us from truth. Keep watching with an open mind, because the story unfolding here is not about blame. It is about alignment. It is about discovering who truly belongs beside the person you are becoming, not the version of yourself that existed yesterday, but the one preparing to step into tomorrow. And here is the thought that may surprise you most. The name that will eventually make sense is not shocking because of fame, status, or appearance. It is shocking because you never imagined your future could change simply by one person quietly stepping aside. That realization carries far more power than any dramatic revelation ever could. So don't hurry past this moment. The next piece of this story uncovers why the separation has already begun, and why the signs surrounding you have been pointing toward the same truth all along. When those hidden connections finally come together, you may see your own life from an entirely different perspective. Before your mind begins searching through familiar faces, wait. Because the next clue does not arrive the way most people expect. It comes through patterns. Quiet ones. The kind that only become obvious after you stop chasing answers and begin observing what life has been trying to reveal. This is where everything starts to connect. Think back over the past few weeks. Has someone who once seemed deeply involved in your life suddenly become unpredictable? Perhaps their words no longer carry the same warmth. Maybe their enthusiasm appears forced. Or maybe they simply drift in and out without explanation. Most people would call this coincidence. But sometimes distance is not rejection, it is redirection. Sometimes what feels like loss is actually space being created for something your future has been waiting to receive. There is an invisible difference between people who help you grow and people who quietly keep you standing in the same place. The second group rarely appears harmful. In fact, they often make you feel comfortable. They encourage familiar routines. They remind you of who you used to be. Yet every time you prepare to step towards something greater, their presence gently pulls your attention backward. Not because they wish to control your future, but because they only know the version of you that existed before your transformation began. Now ask yourself a simple question. Who always appears whenever you decide to change something important? Who unexpectedly re-enters your life just as you gain momentum? Who seems connected to every delay, every distraction, every moment you almost gave up? Do not answer too quickly. The truth often hides beneath the first assumption. Keep listening, because the final picture is still unfolding. Imagine standing beside a river. The water keeps moving forward, never arguing with the stones in its path. It simply flows around them until they no longer matter. Your journey is becoming like that river. You are no longer being asked to fight every obstacle. Instead, you are learning how to move beyond what no longer belongs in your direction. That quiet shift changes everything. And perhaps this is the perfect moment to pause together. If these words are making you reflect on your own journey, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Someone else reading them may discover the encouragement they needed today. And if this style of storytelling speaks to you, subscribing simply means we continue exploring these meaningful journeys together. Now, here comes something even more unexpected. The person being removed may not disappear overnight. Instead, your connection to them begins changing first. Conversations lose their urgency. Their opinions no longer define your choices. Their approval becomes less important. Without realizing it, you stop carrying emotional weight that never truly belonged to you. The separation begins inside long before it becomes visible on the outside. This is why many people misunderstand transformation. They expect fireworks. Instead, life often changes through peaceful moments that almost seem ordinary. One morning you wake up and realize you no longer feel the need to chase what once consumed your thoughts. That is not an accident. That is growth quietly completing its work. What if this entire season has never been about removing a person, but removing the version of you that depended on them? Think carefully about that. Because if your perspective changes, every relationship around you changes as well. The same faces remain, yet your understanding becomes completely different. Soon, another layer of this mystery will emerge. The signs will become clearer. The reason this particular name feels so surprising will finally begin to make sense. And when that moment arrives, you may realize the greatest turning point was never about someone leaving your life, it was about finally recognizing the path that had been waiting for you all along. Just when you believe you have figured it out, pause one more time, because the final piece rarely appears where people are looking. The greatest revelations do not arrive with noise. They arrive in stillness, in one unexpected realization that quietly changes everything you believed was true. And this is that moment. By now, you may have thought of several names. One from the past. One from the present. Perhaps even someone you never expected to question. But this journey was never meant to lead you toward suspicion. It was meant to lead you toward awareness. There is an enormous difference between removing someone out of fear and naturally outgrowing a connection. One creates conflict. The other creates peace. And peace is the true sign that your life is moving in the right direction. Look carefully at the people who remain after difficult seasons. They never demand that you become smaller so they can feel comfortable. They celebrate your progress instead of competing with it. They encourage your vision instead of reminding you why it might fail. Those are the people who belong in the chapters ahead. Everyone else slowly fades. Not because they are bad people, but because every story has characters whose role eventually reaches its natural conclusion. Now imagine standing at the entrance of a long tunnel. Behind you is everything familiar. Ahead of you is a future you cannot completely see. Most people hesitate because they are afraid of what they might lose. Yet very few stop to wonder what they might finally gain. What if the greatest opportunity of your life has been waiting patiently on the other side of one difficult goodbye? What if the future has been knocking quietly while your attention remained fixed on a door that was already closing? This is why timing matters so much. Life does not always remove someone the moment you ask for change. Sometimes it waits until you are strong enough to continue without constantly looking back. Growth is not measured by how tightly you can hold on. It is measured by how peacefully you can move forward. And here is the surprising truth hidden inside the title you've been following from the very beginning. That a name that shocks you may not be shocking because it belongs to someone powerful, famous, or unexpected. It becomes shocking because, deep inside, you never imagined that this particular connection had quietly shaped so many of your choices. When that realization arrives, everything begins to make sense. Conversations that once confused you. Delays that frustrated you. Opportunities that appeared only after certain people drifted away. Suddenly, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. But there is one final question only you can answer. Who are you becoming now that you are no longer carrying what was never meant to stay? Close your eyes for just a moment and picture the version of yourself 1 year from now. Notice the confidence, the calmness, the freedom to make decisions without fear of disappointing someone else. That future version of you is not waiting to be created. It is already beginning to emerge through every choice you make today. Perhaps this message was never about predicting a specific person at all. Perhaps it was an invitation to trust the quiet wisdom already growing within you. Because the strongest guidance rarely points fingers. It shines light on the path ahead until the next step becomes obvious. As this chapter comes to an end, remember one simple truth: every meaningful ending quietly protects the beginning of something greater. Some people leave your story so that your purpose can finally have room to speak. Others remain because they are meant to walk beside the person you are becoming, so move forward with an open heart. Leave behind the weight of guessing names and start recognizing patterns instead. The answers you seek will reveal themselves naturally, one moment at a time. And when you look back on this season, you may smile, not because someone disappeared from your life, but because their departure made space for a future you never thought was possible. Before you leave this story behind, there is one last truth that changes the meaning of everything you've heard so far. The ending is not where this journey stops. It is where your own awareness truly begins. If you have stayed until this moment, then perhaps something inside you has already recognized a pattern that words alone could never fully explain. There comes a season in every life when the questions become quieter than the answers. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What is this preparing me for?" That single change in perspective transforms ordinary moments into meaningful ones. The closed doors no longer feel like punishment. The unexpected distance no longer feels like rejection. Instead, each experience becomes another step leading you toward a future that fits who you are becoming. Think about the people who crossed your path years ago. At one time, you believed some of them would remain forever. You laughed together, made plans together, imagined countless tomorrows together. Yet life continued moving, and many of those names slowly became memories instead of daily conversations. At first, it felt confusing. Later, it felt understandable. Eventually, it became something you were grateful for because every ending quietly made room for a new beginning. Perhaps the greatest surprise is not discovering who leaves your life, but discovering the strength that appears after they do. You realize you are capable of making decisions you once feared. You notice peace replacing constant uncertainty. You begin trusting your own direction instead of waiting for someone else's approval. That is the quiet victory few people recognize until they experience it themselves. Now imagine waking up tomorrow with complete confidence that every step ahead has purpose, even when you cannot yet see the entire road. How differently would you speak? How differently would you dream? How differently would you treat yourself? The future does not ask you to know every answer today. It only asks you to keep walking with courage, one decision at a time. And maybe this is the perfect place to thank you for sharing this journey. If this story gave you something meaningful to reflect on, you are always welcome to share your thoughts in the comments. Someone reading your words may find exactly the encouragement they needed today. And if you enjoy thoughtful stories like this, subscribing simply means we'll continue exploring new journeys together in the days ahead. One final thought before this message fades. Do not spend your energy trying to force people to stay. The relationships meant to grow with you will never require you to become someone you are not. Likewise, do not rush to push people away based on a single emotion. Give life the space to reveal its patterns with patience and wisdom. Clarity arrives naturally when your heart is calm. As you move forward, carry this truth with you: every meaningful chapter has its own purpose. Some people inspire your beginning. Others strengthen your middle. A few remain for the ending. None of those roles are failures. They are simply different parts of a much larger story. So lift your eyes toward what is ahead instead of holding tightly to what has already passed. The person you are becoming deserves relationships built on trust, encouragement, and genuine respect. When those connections arrive, you will not need to question whether they belong. Their presence will bring peace rather than confusion. And perhaps that is the greatest revelation of all. The most important name in this entire story was never someone else's. It was yours. Because the real transformation begins the moment you recognize your own worth, trust your own path, and choose a future that reflects the best version of yourself. From that moment onward, every step becomes lighter, every horizon becomes brighter, and every new chapter becomes an invitation to discover just how far your journey can truly go. The story may sound complete, yet one final reflection remains. Take a slow breath and imagine yourself standing at the edge of a sunrise. The night behind you was filled with questions. The horizon ahead is filled with possibilities. Between those two moments stands a single decision: the choice to keep moving forward without allowing yesterday to define tomorrow. Every meaningful journey reaches a point where looking back no longer provides new answers. There comes a time when your energy is better spent building what is ahead than trying to understand every detail of what has already passed. That moment is closer than you think. In fact, it may have already arrived. You once believed that every person who entered your life would stay forever. Then life taught you something deeper. Some people appear to awaken your confidence. Some challenge your patience. Others remind you of the importance of kindness, resilience, or forgiveness. None of those encounters are wasted. Even the chapters that seemed confusing become valuable when viewed from a greater distance.